Bonjour, merci tous d'avoir resté jusqu'à la fin de la journée. Today I'll be synthesizing research that I conducted in collaboration with Dr. Louisa Véronis from the University of Ottawa that has focused on Francophone minority communities in Ontario, specifically Ottawa and London. As a historic settler population, French speakers have linguistic rights that are protected by Canadian legislation. And Francophone minority communities in Canada are those with concentrations of French-speaking populations located outside of the Francophone province of Quebec. These communities vary across the country in terms of their respective histories, geographies, population size, and institutional completeness. Ongoing immigration to Canada has contributed to demographic changes in the population, with many immigrants speaking neither English nor French, and with most newcomers learning English in order to integrate into the Anglo-dominant host society. So aiming to bolster the dwindling demographic weight of FMCs, the Canadian federal government is strategically using Francophone immigration as a policy tool to enhance the vitality of these communities. Yet the global francophonie is diverse, and with people coming to settle in communities where they often become both linguistic and racial minorities, several challenges to integration may be experienced, with these experiences being shaped by the unique local context of the FMC into which they settle. Community sites can be understood as physical and material spaces such as schools, community centers, daycares, churches, immigrant associations, recreational and arts programs, etc., as well as virtual spaces including community and ethnic media, such as newspapers and radio stations, and social media networks, among others. These sites are particularly important for members of Francophone minority communities to be able to live, access services, and socialize in French, thereby representing important resources to support the active participation and social integration of French-speaking immigrants and refugees. Louisa and I have undertaken a research program to explore the role of Francophone community spaces in the social and cultural integration of French-speaking immigrants and refugees who settle in FMCs. And while the specific research questions have been unique to each individual study, more broadly, we've been interested in addressing objectives such as these, which include understanding French-speaking migrants' experiences of social and cultural integration into FMCs, including a focus on their engagement within minority community spaces in particular, and upon their social participation within such spaces, and examining their experiences of belonging, inclusion, and exclusion with respect to intersecting aspects of identity such as language, race, gender, ethnicity, legal status, and religion. To address such objectives, we've used critical qualitative methodologies, including ethnographic and case study approaches, that have adopted a range of methods. So across our studies, we have used observational, dialogic, visual, and participatory methods, often with many of these being included within a single study. So today, I will briefly address 3 issues that have been salient across our studies, especially the most recent ones in Ottawa and London. These communities provided an interesting comparison given their differences. While both are designated FMCs within the province of Ontario, Ottawa is larger and more institutionally complete, while London is a smaller and much more linguistically isolated FMC. So to give you a bit more context, according to the 2016 census, Ottawa's official language minority population numbered 149,550, or 16.2% of the total population, whereas London's was only 5,795, or 1.5% of the total population. So participants identified diverse challenges to their social and cultural integration within the respective Francophone minority communities examined. I'm going to show how being embedded within a larger English-speaking environment contributes to the relative invisibility of FMCs, even in Ottawa, that creates specific challenges for French-speaking migrants. I'll then speak to the paradoxical role played by FMCs within such a minority context, where they can contribute to the further exclusion and marginalization of French-speaking migrants and or to their inclusion and integration. And finally, I'll provide a few examples of the potentially positive role that can be played by minority community spaces in supporting the social participation of French-speaking migrants in varied activities within the FMC and the broader community. The Francophone community's invisibility is partly characterized by limitations of Francophone organizations that have smaller operating budgets and fewer services to offer, contributing to less frequent community activities. Many participants have experienced isolation, particularly those who immigrated from countries and or ethnic communities that are smaller in size and so not as well represented. For participants in Ottawa, despite having access to a broader range of services and programming in French than was the case in London, most still interacted mainly with people from their own ethnocultural communities, and only a few described themselves as being invested in Francophone community spaces, for instance, through volunteering. And it was mainly those who were more well-established and who had been in Ottawa for longer periods of time. Though this participant also found it challenging to locate the French-speaking community itself, apart from a few formally organized events. Les Franco-Ontariens sont où? Ils sont où, justement? C'est la question. Parce que quand tu veux, on entend franco-ontarien, c'est quand il y a peut-être des festivités ou bien quelque chose en lien avec la francophonie. Une demi-journée, bien quelques heures que vous allez passer ensemble. À part ça, il n'y a rien. While participants acknowledged having had access to services in French that they found quite invaluable to their experiences, they nonetheless addressed several challenges they had faced. Within both cities, it was deemed ultimately necessary to learn English, not only to obtain employment, but to facilitate day-to-day life in a majority Anglophone city, such as conversing with neighbors or communicating with store clerks. While many identified as Francophone, many did not want to limit their integration and belonging to the Francophone community, such as this participant who said, donc, je suis d'abord francophone, mais je ne veux pas me mettre dans une restriction communautaire parce que je sais dans un pays que pratiquement 90% est anglophone, donc je me dis, je cherche à ressembler à tout autre Canadien. Voilà, qui a l'anglais et qui a le français, ou bien qui est anglophone et francophone. Voilà l'objectif. Je ne veux pas me limiter à être francophone, donc je ne suis pas dans cette voie parce que je ne pense pas que c'est la francophonie qui va faciliter mon intégration. Nonetheless, many expressed interest in wanting to get to know the established community and to participate in Francophone events, but were left with the challenge, as mentioned previously, of trying to locate this largely invisible community. So in addition to the difficulties related directly to the minority context, other challenges related to the community itself were addressed. Participants discussed a general lack of reception on the part of the host communities, and also mentioned experiences of discrimination stemming from differences between community members, such as those related to differences in accent and cultures. So these types of separations that existed within the FMC contributed to negative dynamics for some of the participants, most of whom had much more interaction with other French-speaking immigrants than with members of the Canadian-born Francophone community. Yet, as shown by this quotation, and supported by many others like it, the presence of the FMC was nonetheless valuable. Il y a plein d'opportunités pour s'épanouir en français, des occasions pour se rencontrer. Il y a des occasions de célébrer la francophonie. On s'épanouit, on rencontre les autres francophones. On se rencontre à plusieurs reprises pour échanger, partager nos expériences. Je dirais se sentir ou être francophone à London, c'est vraiment stimulant parce qu'on ne se sent pas seul. On est dans une communauté, bien sûr, dans une situation minoritaire, avec toute une pression majoritaire anglophone qui agit autour de nous. Mais on a des occasions de nous épanouir, d'échanger, de discuter et de s'amuser. So the challenges associated with settling in a minority community can be complex as intersecting identities are negotiated within multiple settings. The potential for community sites to be affirming places of inclusion for immigrants and refugees is an important one that should not be overlooked, but also must not be taken for granted by putting policies and practices into place that encourage safe, welcoming spaces. This participant shared with us the affirmation he experienced at his church, which was an important benefit of his participation in that Francophone space, in addition to the other more tangible benefits such as networking and the assistance and support he received in other areas. Le premier bénéfice, c'est la valorisation. Il n'y a rien de pire que de se sentir sans valeur, surtout pour un immigrant francophone à l'Amérique du Nord. Sentir que ta langue ne vaut rien. Toutes les années que tu as passées aux études, on te dit que si tu ne connais pas l'anglais, ça n'a pas de sens. Mais tout d'un coup, tu te trouves dans un endroit où tu es fonctionnaire. À l'église, tu te sens valorisé parce que tu communiques facilement, parce que les gens avec qui tu es, vous avez le même langage. C'est la valorisation et la participation qui te valorisent encore davantage, parce que la langue te permet de communiquer et d'être actif. Alors, ça te valorise. La valorisation, c'est quelque chose de très important et qui peut avoir un impact sur ta vie privée. Tu te sens important. Tu vois? So while the presence of Francophone community spaces within FMCs can enable the social participation of French-speaking migrants and provide opportunities for them to meet other French speakers and integrate into the community, this process was met by several challenges, such as locating these spaces within a largely invisible linguistic community. The prospect of compounding their minoritization by being a minority within a minority was also not necessarily desired by all newcomers, some of whom wanted to assimilate into the broader Canadian society and not necessarily identify as a linguistic minority. While several similarities were noted across the two cities, a few differences were also identified. The higher number of organizations and services in Ottawa provided more options to people there, while limitations in London meant that immigrants and refugees often had to access services in English to meet their needs. Ironically, those in Ottawa seemed to be clients of organizations, while those in London seemed to be active participants of the community. It appeared that by having more options in Ottawa contributed to people becoming less centralized into a smaller minority community. So with respect to the positive role to be played by minority community spaces then, it's important to recognize differences in the forms of social participation which reflect diverse roles that French-speaking migrants occupy within the varied community spaces, whether as clients, volunteers, members, or employees, that their participation is often targeted according to the type of Francophone community site by its mission, its vision, its mandate or objectives, and that different types of social participation contribute to different experiences, outcomes, and benefits. So a range of spaces are needed. Our findings demonstrate that Francophone community spaces are essential to support not only the social, but also the economic, cultural, and even political integration of French-speaking migrants by enabling a variety of types and forms of social participation. More specifically, it appears that social participation contributes to the feeling of belonging and inclusion of French-speaking migrants, and also to the development of social, informational, and professional networks, and therefore the social capital that they need to facilitate their participation and integration in general. That being said, these spaces must remain welcoming and inclusive, in part by being more representative of those that they serve. So this comparative research conducted in Ontario with Louisa highlighted differences between cities based on their geographic, social, and historical contexts. While general themes may translate across FMCs throughout Canada, locally based studies are essential for identifying specific opportunities and challenges faced by French-speaking migrants who settle into different communities. And although Vancouver is one of the farthest from the country's Francophone core, there's still an important number of French speakers there whose experiences within that unique context has been vastly understudied. Vancouver is the largest urban center in BC and one of the main destinations of immigrants to Canada. Following Ontario, BC receives more French-speaking migrants to FMCs than any other Canadian province or territory, and perhaps most importantly, the province also has the highest concentration of French-speaking migrants among its Francophone population of any Canadian province or territory outside of Quebec. So the immigrant richness of BC's French-speaking population makes it unique within the country and important for in-depth study. So we want to thank our funders and all of those who have participated in our research projects and the co-investigators who have supported various aspects of the projects. But on a related note, in the final seconds that I have, I want to take this time to strongly denounce Doug Ford's symbolic and financial attack on Franco-Ontarians, which will have negative impacts for French speakers, including immigrants and refugees. We must not allow bilingualism to become a partisan issue, and we must defend the rights of linguistic minorities. Merci beaucoup.